The Truth and the Circle Around It by K.G. Scott. Chapter 18. The Famous Final Scene. Winnipeg ERT has arrived. The RCMP helicopter is helping the Huey bring the Hughes down. Willie, Brad, Johnny, Dirk, Henderson, and Antonio Alvarez are having a little powwow in the back, and everyone else is ready to pounce. Bring them all here. It's time I explain the situation to these law-abiding citizens, Alvarez ordered as he turned on his bullhorn. I hope you can all hear me, coppers. I've always wanted to say that, Antonio beamed. He went on the way he always does, explaining all the vile things that would happen if safe passage were not allowed, etc., etc. During this, the rest of his helpers went on their merry way to bring the hostages to the central location. I don't think he's still up there, Kevin said to Kelly. Me neither. If he was, he would have killed us all by now. Nope, he ran. Kelly agreed. Once we know for sure, you go in through the roof entrance. I'll go in the second floor and come up the stairs to meet you. Okay, Kevin. Kelly slapped Kevin on the arm and bounded up the ladder towards the roof. Before anyone else could order them down, they were out of sight. Alvarez wasn't expecting the power to be out this soon. He thought the police would bring in the power company, which would give him some time. While the others were rounding up the hostages and bringing them to the fortress, as he called it, Antonio was preparing the next phase of his plan. He was almost certain now that the only way out was to prove he wasn't joking. So he would need to kill one of the hostages. He also needed a hand up on the law, and to do this, he had devised a huge explosion. To be aware of how he intended to pull it off, you must first be familiar with the layout of the complex. As you know, it is a large place. In fact, the total land area is almost 3 acres. The front of the building is a 3-story office and sales area of about 1,800 square feet. There is a hallway section that attaches it to the next building, which is over 6,000 square feet. This is the main part of the complex. It is over 3 stories high and separated into 5 large areas, with 2 of those being split up into small bins to store feed and storage rooms. In some of these small storage rooms on the first floor is where the women are being held. 2 other areas are connected in an L shape around the outer walls. These are split into larger bins to hold seed grains, with the last area where Antonio is standing, being in the middle of it all. This is the control and distribution area, crisscrossed with walkways, ladders, chutes, tubes, and machinery. At the very back of the complex are the 5 silos standing tall above the rest of the complex, with the control shack and the chutes connecting them to the main building. Between the back of the main building and the silos underneath the chutes to the silos is the scales and unloading area, where trucks come in to load and unload. The side of the building Earl and Joe are on is where the smaller rooms are, and at the end of it is the control shack for the silos. On the other side of the building are the larger bins, where Bob has made his way around to the back and found a way in. There are now more than 40 police officers at the scene, cars spreading out around the building, and the emergency response team ready to start their assault at the front. Antonio's plan is sinister and deadly. Inside the loading area, there are 2 armored cars ready to go. Booby traps are set up in the office building and around the perimeter of the middle distribution area where he is now. The middle of the silos is half full of nitrogen fertilizer, with tanks of diesel fuel above, with release valves and a detonator, all on timers. which are remote controlled from a cell phone. He plans to kill one of the women in front of everyone, while he and his men have the others in the trucks. He then opens the valves on the diesel tanks with a call from inside the trucks, which will then come rushing out, one from each entrance, to head directly to the back of the compound, where they have cut the fence so it will fall when they hit it. As they go through a drag on the bottom of the second truck, will pull up a makeshift ramp, which will expose two deep trenches flanked by spike belts. The first police car to go through will be trapped in the trenches, forcing the others behind it to stop. Then, once at a safe distance, he makes a call to his friend, the detonator. Everything within 2 blocks will disintegrate, and he will be the criminal powerhouse he wants to be. Public enemy number 1. I'll get this one. You go grab the old chick by the shack, Johnny told Dirk as he used the key to unlock the door. He opened the door and stepped into the room. Olivia was squirming in the corner, unable to move. The look on her face was pure, frozen fear. I'm going to cut the ties on your ankles and knees so you can walk. I promise I won't hurt you if you don't try anything. I won't, her voice trembling. Guess I better not let you near a chair then, huh? Johnny smiled, trying to calm her, and they both laughed it off. Laughed, if only for a second. Dirk unlocked the door and stepped inside, turning his back to the room to kick the doorstop into place with his shoe. Marion jumped up, and in 2 lunging steps gave him a field goal kick to his lower extremities. The groan he let out wouldn't be loud enough for anyone to hear legibly. And she continued her assault using that big wedding ring on the back of his head and neck. Did I mention she was a lefty? She grabbed his collar and threw him back so the door would close and jumped on his stomach with her knees. Then she planted her left knee into the already tender midsection, grabbed the MP5 out of his hands, and proceeded to kick him in the face with the right about 7 times, until she was quite sure he wouldn't be a problem anymore. Then she locked the deadbolt and hunkered down to the left of the door in the corner and waited. Willie and Henderson left Brad at the door outside the room where Grace was and headed for the stairs to go up to the office where Carla was. It was about this time when Earl and Joe were confronted by a city police supervisor who wanted Joe to go back to the triage area the ambulances had set up 2 lots over. He was leaking pretty well from his hand, and Earl was just the right size guy to carry him if need be, so they decided it might be a good idea. Off they went. Bob found himself in the bay with the armored cars and relayed the info to the troops outside with his radio. He began to climb a ladder to take him to the top of the loading area, where there was a door that leads over the large bins. When he got up there, a familiar sound would stop him dead in his tracks. Kevin and Kelly were inside, but each had stopped to take a look around. Kelly had to jump down an entire floor to avoid the tripwires Johnny had put in place during his retreat. He got up his courage, hoped for the best, and leapt. It was one fuck of a hard landing. But all he did was jar himself. He's going to be okay. Kevin found himself looking into an office floor, partitions, desk, and other places for people to hide. He better do a sweep. He spent the next couple of minutes laying on the floor flat, looking to see if there were any feet behind partitions, etc. Then he got up and moved around. And just as he was going to look behind a closet door, he saw a small piece of metal wrapped around the top edge. He continued to look around and noticed a wire attached to the handle of the glass door leading into the hallway section. He stepped back to the entrance where he had come in and called on his radio. I think this place is booby-trapped. Everyone stopped what they were doing. Yeah, it is, Kelly called back. I just had to do a swan dive to get around a little present. Can you two get out of here? Get out of there? The ERT commander asked. Nope, Kelly answered. We're here now, sir, Kevin chimed in. I made it in pretty far, but I don't think I should go back either, Bob called out. Henderson waited at the end of the hallway where he could see outside. Then Willie went down the hall and unlocked the door to the office. Kelly was 3 feet away on the other side of the door to the stairs. He moved like lightning and flew out the door into the hallway. Willie spun towards him, and there they were, face to face again. This time they were each holding a weapon. Kelly with a shotgun and Willie with an Uzi. They just stood there, frozen, staring into each other's eyes. I heard you lived, Willie sneered. No thanks to you, you fucking animal, Kelly growled back. Inside the room, Carla took in a deep breath as she realized the voices. She began to shake like she was in a freezer. Kevin, hearing the voices, was moving up the stairs. Henderson peeked around the corner. I've got a little present for you, cop. Willie began to emit an evil chuckle. He, 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 he. Snap! The noise came from inside the room where Carla was, and it distracted everyone. Willie fired into Kelly as he burst through the door, pushing it open with his back. Boom! Kelly's blast missed as he flew back against the wall. Henderson swung his handgun around the corner. Kevin swung the door open and held it with a foot while he aimed his magnum around the corner. Then the two of them looked at Kelly, half leaned into the corner, the shotgun falling from his hands, blood coming out of his arms, legs, and mouth. Hiya! A female karate scream from inside the room. Ah! A man's yelp of pain, also from inside. Thud! The sound of a body thumping against the wall. Bullets came flying out into the hallway and staircase from inside the room. Kevin dove down the stairs as the rounds narrowly missed him. Kelly slumped the rest of the way down to the floor. This time, the vest was of no use against the Teflon-coated rounds. Ah! Another male yelp of pain. The door opened while Willie came limping out into the hallway, 2 wooden shafts protruding out of his back at different angles, blood dripping to the floor. He staggered, turned down the hall to look at Henderson with a blank stare. Carla came running out of the room past him and dropped to the floor on her knees beside Kelly, shaking and speechless. Henderson began to walk down the hallway towards the damage. Willie could barely keep his balance. He staggered some more and turned towards Carla and just stood there and stared. At the bottom of the stairs, Kevin climbed up, keeping low. He put his left fingers under the bottom of the door, which had not closed all the way. He was just about to pull the door open when a shot rang out in the hallway. Carla let go a short squeak, and a body hit the floor. He yanked the door open and jumped out into the hallway to see Willie on the floor with half his head gone. Carla over Kelly and Henderson. He yanked the door open and jumped out into the hallway to see Willie on the floor with half his head gone. Carla over Kelly and Henderson with smoke billowing out the end of his barrel. I promised her no one would harm her. Henderson looked at Kevin, and I meant it. Then he lowered his gun. He's dead. Carla began to cry as she slumped into a hug over Kelly's body. Look out for tripwires and don't open any doors, Henderson said to Kevin as he began to walk slowly towards him. He dropped his gun on the floor. You go do your job. I'll take her outside to safety. Kevin circled around to head down the hall. How do I know I can trust you? I didn't kill you, Henderson said, as he put his arms on Carla's shoulders and began to pull her away from Kelly's body. During all this, another scene played out. Brad was pushing the door open when the shooting started. Of course, it distracted him. It distracted Grace, too. But within a second, she took advantage of it and pummeled his skull with a chair leg. She dragged him back into the room and took some of the ties out of the back pocket they were sticking out of and made it so he wasn't going anywhere for a while. Then she picked up his gun and started slowly down the hallway. It was at this time that Kevin had made it to her. When she saw his police jacket, she stopped and stared. "Are you for real?" "Corporal Shears, Royal Canadian Mounted Police," he said as he pointed his magnum away from her. "I recognize you from the pictures, ma'am." Then he ran her to the hallway, called out to Henderson, and assured her going with him this time was the right thing to do. Antonio knew the shit had hit the fan, and the only person he was worried about was himself. Johnny came into the big room pulling Olivia along beside him. As Antonio turned around to see who it was, his face went vicious, and he had backhanded Olivia, sending her flying backwards to the hard concrete floor. "Don't move!" The voice Alvarez recognized was followed by a tiny click as Bob took the shotgun off safe. "Do as he says," Alvarez told Johnny, who was lurching around to see where the voice was coming from. "Where are you, brother?" "Let's just say I have the advantage," Bob called back as Alvarez looked up at the dark outline on the top of the large bins. "She walks outside with your little flunky, or I drop both of you. Any fancy move, and I drop both of you." Alvarez threw down his pistol. "Do the same, Johnny. He's not telling any lies." Johnny threw his MP5 to the floor. "Now what?" "Now you go. Now you and the Now you and the lay go outside. You with your hands on the back of your head. And don't try anything, because I have a bead on you all the way," Bob ordered. "Help the lady, Johnny," Alvarez said over his shoulder. Johnny grabbed her arms and helped her to her feet. "Step back, Antonio," Bob said, and Antonio took 3 slow steps away from the other 2. "That's far enough. Keep away from the walls, too. Now, Johnny, you go first, and when you get out the door, you let them know she's coming behind you. And I sure hope there aren't any surprises that might hurt her, or—" "You'll drop me," Johnny answered. "I'll make sure she gets out okay." Bob never took his sights off Antonio, while Johnny stepped towards the door, gesturing for Olivia to follow. He began to open the door and called out to the waiting police, telling them what he had been told to do. A few seconds later, Olivia followed him out, and the door closed behind them, 2 in custody. By this time, Kevin had made his way down the hall and into the big dark room. He could see an outline of a man standing in the room, but he was behind a bunch of chutes and tubes and machinery from Kevin's angle. He began to move slowly along to get a better look, when suddenly the man jumped behind one of the big electric motors. Boom! Fuck, that shotgun is loud, especially in a place like this. Bang, bang, bang. Whoever it was behind that machinery was shooting up at the roof. Clack! The sound of a shotgun falling to the floor from a high place, groaning and shuffling from up there somewhere. "This is Riley. I've been hit. Alvarez is still in the building," Bob called out across the radio waves. The tapping of shoes running on concrete, followed by the clank, clank, clanking of steps up a metal stairway. Kevin stayed as quiet as he could, moving along the room, The only light source was the large windows at the top of two sides of the building, and they were dusty as hell. As he got out near the open part of the room, he saw all the weapons on the floor, but he knew Bob would still have his 9mm, and Alvarez was obviously armed. There were footprints in the dust by one of the metal staircases that went up to the walkways at each floor level. Bang, clang, pa-ting. The shot came from Kevin's left. Bob was shooting at Alvarez. It bounced off metal. Bang, thwap. Alvarez's return shot hit the outside concrete wall. While the shooting was going back and forth, Kevin was making his way up the metal stairs, keeping his magnum pointed up ahead. Movement. Bang. Then he ran up to the next level as bullets cracked and clanked off the surroundings. He made it to the second level and ran as fast as he could along the walkway. Bang, bang, bang. Above his head, hoping to get a lucky shot in, or at least keep Alvarez busy until he could get to the end and hide around the corner of the wall. Am I to guess that's your little buddy Shears, my brother? Alvarez yelled out. Brother? Kevin asked himself as he looked up to try and pinpoint where the voice had come from. Kevin? Bob called out. Yeah? Kevin answered. Get the fuck out of here. Bob ordered as he stepped to the edge of the high wall, holding his gun with both hands, pointed across the 20 feet that separated the large room. There were steps above Kevin's head, and about a third of the way down the top section. This appears to be a Mexican standoff, brother, Alvarez chuckled as he came out into the open pointing his gun at Bob. You should know. You used to be the Mexican cop, Bob yelled back. I still am. However, I'm not sure if I'll get any more paychecks from them. Alvarez laughed. What the fuck is going on? Kevin called out as he moved across the 20-foot walkway that went over to the other side where Bob was, finally getting a bead on Alvarez. As the conversation continued, he made his way up the next ladder to the top level, still keeping a fix on Alvarez. It sounds like he cares a great deal about your opinion, brother. Alvarez laughed. Should I tell him our little secret? Kevin, stay where you are, Bob called out. What the fuck is he blabbing about, Bob? Kevin was annoyed and confused. This asshole is my half-brother. He used to be a cop. He used to be a good cop for a Mexican, Bob explained. Ah, yes, your loving attitude towards our methods, Antonio said. He was with Interpol for a few years, and then I found out he was using his connections to play both sides, Bob continued. He had me by the balls because I had worked out a deal with the superintendent who was on his take. I did what I could when I could, but it was never going to be enough. This is the ERT commander, the voice crackled over the radio. Get out of the building. There is a bomb in the building. Unable to comply, Bob called Bob called back. It doesn't matter if I hit this button. Alvarez held up his cell phone. Everything within a half kilometer will be destroyed. Bang! Bob's shot destroyed the cell phone and took half of Antonio's left hand off with it. Bang! 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 Antonio's shots ripped into Bob as the villain fell backwards. When he hit the floor behind him, he scrambled behind some machinery. Kevin ran the rest of the way up the stairs and out onto the platform towards where Bob was wobbling over the edge. He looked over and saw Alvarez looking out from behind the metal contraption. Bang! He fired a shot in the direction and half-tackled Bob as he grabbed him and pulled him behind the same sort of mechanical device, just large enough to hide behind. But as he did, bang, bang, two more quick shots tore into Bob. Bang! Kevin fired his last shot towards Alvarez. Is he dead? Alvarez called out. Kevin felt for Bob's pulse on his neck. Yes? Then pulled off Bob's glasses and clasped his palm over his eyes so they could close with the one last natural reaction the body allows before death settles in. We both knew it would come to this, Alvarez said somberly as he knelt down, pulling his hair with his good hand and pushing his face into his jacket sleeves. Kevin stood up and walked to the edge of the wall. Come out, you worthless cocksucker. Oh, and just what the fuck are you going to do now? Alvarez hollered as he rose up and walked out to the edge of the wall he was at. Do you think you are going to arrest me, you little pissant? I'm just thinking about how lawful I'm going to be, asshole. Kevin growled back. Ha! Alvarez yelled as he began to reach for his pistol. I wouldn't do that, Kevin suggested. Why not? I could still set the bomb off, and at my last count, you were out of bullets. They stared at each other for a few seconds. You are the worthless little cocksucker, and I am the great one. You couldn't catch a cold without help, you little fuck. You'll never amount to anything more than an annoyance to talents such as myself. I own you, you little bastard. Antonio's rant had echoed off everything in the building, but mostly it seemed to repeat itself the most in Kevin's ears as the two of them stood across the 20-foot barrier of emptiness between them. Then Kevin looked down at his left hand. He had a grip on something. Here, catch, he said in a sarcastic tone as he tossed a silver and black object about half the size and shape of a doorknob at Alvarez. Alvarez reached out and grabbed the object with his good hand, holding it out from his face so he could see what it was. Antonio's face went pale and blank as he held one of the speed loaders from Kevin's Magnum revolver at just below chin height, with his bent and now sagging arm. Then he swallowed as he looked over at Kevin. The light coming in through the dusty windows was easily enough to illuminate the steely, cold glimmer of the lead bullets staring out from the chambers of the revolver as it went click, click, click. When Kevin pulled back the hammer, his expression went to a blush, hopelessness of fear as his eyes moved slightly to see the cold, angry glare of Kevin's grayish blue eyes lined up perfectly with the red block sights of the steady-held pistol. You are just another target of opportunity. Kevin paused purposefully, his finger visibly squeezing against the trigger, and I reloaded. Bang. 1400, July 11, 1992, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. The end. Epilogue. The price is sometimes too high to pay, as Kevin Shears, focused back to the present. I realize the same sick feeling I get at seeing the dead officer lying beside his patrol car today is equal to how I felt seeing Kelly there in that hallway, all cut to shreds. The same feeling I had looking at Bob, who was probably the best friend I've had on the force. It doesn't matter how much is the same. It doesn't matter how much things are different, or whether it's in Edmonton like today, or Winnipeg like then. It doesn't matter whether you know the officer or not. There is a connection, a brotherhood, as they say, that hits you with an unexplainable feeling. You don't even need to be there. You could be hearing it in the coffee room from the speaker of the radio, and you could be watching television or read about it in the newspaper. It's not an emotion. It's more than that. We found the ladies that day and got them out in one piece. I think they were the toughest people there. Grace and Marion were both ready to take on the world. Olivia was okay once she got outside. I think being cops' wives had about 2% to do with how they handled themselves. I think the kind of people that they are is why they became cops' wives. And I think that is what helped them rise up to act the way they did. They sure all got their shots in. Carla was never the same after that day. She taught us all that the ones you have to look out for the most are the silent ones. She said later that the reason she snapped the stick so it would have the sharp edges was because somehow she knew she would have to try and save Kelly. In fact, if Willie would have been firing regular bullets, she probably would have. Deep inside that sweet, tiny girl was a grizzly bear. She took therapy for years. She tried hard to get on with her life, but she never showed emotions the same way again. She finally set herself free in 1997. Earl took Kelly's death as hard as you could expect a father to, especially when you add the brotherhood of officers factor. Bob going the same day and him not getting into the building to be able to be there to protect them. That's just how old cops think. He retired a few months later. He'd more than put in his time, but he needed a change to be able to cope with it all. The job was a daily reminder. He's doing okay now. He lives near Edmonton, on an acreage. I see him sometimes at Oilers games. And he comes around a couple times a year for functions and such. The funerals were hell. I did the second eulogy at Bob's, and I was still in shock. So I don't know if I even made sense. I guess you have to start somewhere. I've done a few more eulogies over the past 10 years. It doesn't get easier. It just gets done. Frederick Henderson was 19 more years on his sentence. He gave the info on the bomb setup in the silo, so by the time Johnny and Olivia were out the door, everyone was beginning to pull way back. Bob saved a lot of lives with that last shot. Henderson sent me a letter a couple of years back. He told me that he had purposely not kidnapped Tracy. He knew Alvarez wanted to do some unmentionable things just to get back at me. In fact, if it would have been up to him, none of the ladies would have been abducted, but he's a follower. Shooting Willie is one of the few decisions he's ever made for himself. I went to see him in prison a couple of times for information on things that have popped up in cases. I don't think he'll live to see his parole hearing. He's wasting away. The Socorro killer had not been found. Neither had the crimes been solved, but they did stop. Another of the vicious murders had taken place in Winnipeg the day before the Alvarez gang was taken down, and then nothing for a few years. So, who was it in the car today that brought all this back into my mind? Book 2 people. Book 2. Book 2 people. Book 2. The end. The Truth and the Circle Around It by K.G. Scott, otherwise known as Rage in the Cage.